Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at Baldwin IV of Jerusalem. Now, in modern society, we oftentimes like to look at Baldwin IV as a great monarch compared to the other kings and queens of Europe and the sultans of the Middle East. This is mainly due to Edward Norton and his amazing performance as Baldwin IV in Kingdom of Heaven. However, was he really as good as the West likes to idolise him? Well, on the 15th of July 1176, Baldwin became 15 and was allowed to rule as king of the Kingdom of Jerusalem. This was because in Europe and also the Crusader states at the time, if a king was born and was coronated underage, so under the age of 15, then then the kingdom was led by a regency. This was essentially just a gathering of nobles who would rule until the king was old enough. This is because, of course, they had some semblance of reason, understanding that a 5-year-old couldn't exactly rule a kingdom very well. Something that the Romans didn't exactly understand, and in fact, something that really wasn't understood for quite a while in Europe until later on in the medieval period. Now, as soon as he came to power, he immediately began to plan attacks on Egypt. This is mainly due to the new threat of Egypt, for Egypt was no longer under the rule of the Fatimids, who were the original caliphate. They were now under the Abbasids, under Saladin, who, of course, is one of the most famous opposers to the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and in fact did conquer them later on after Baldwin IV died. So his plan was very simple, and it was simply to raid and, of course, really a successful raid on Damascus, hopefully, which was something that the Second Crusade had failed at completely. This was mainly due to the fact that Saladin was leading the campaign in Aleppo, meaning that the majority of Muslim forces would not be there to defend Damascus. Although Baldwin was a leper, which was discovered early on in his life, and he could only use one hand to fight with, he still fought in the battle and maintained control of the troops directly. Now, it was a successful raid, and it was successful against Damascus, something that the Christians hadn't really had a taste of until Baldwin, as Damascus had always been quite far away from them and had generally been obviously defended. But that's because they tended to attack whenever the Muslims weren't on any other campaigns. Now, following this successful raid, Baldwin again planned to attack Egypt. But not only was he planning to attack it with his own troops, aka the majority of Templars and Hospitaller Knights, he also planned to use Byzantine support. Now, the Byzantines at the time had been very much retreating in terms of their territory due to the Kingdom of Heaven and other Crusader states that had been taking Byzantine land that had been promised to them after the First Crusade, but also thanks to migrating Turk nomads and the Seljuks and things like that. So the only reason the Byzantines agreed to this was that the Byzantines would gain more land out of it, and the Kingdom of Heaven would actually give them some land along with the other Crusader states. However, due to infighting, mainly from other nobles that were insulting the Byzantines pulled out. Now, the main support the Byzantines were going to give was warships. This is mainly due to the fact that the Muslims had quite a lot of control over the Mediterranean, thanks to Barbary pirates and things like that. So it was very hard for the Christians to ever gain true naval superiority, which was needed at the time if you wanted to make sure that your troops could be fed. It also helped with sieges. So if you look at the siege of Lisbon by English and Spanish forces, you notice that, of course, the English helped very much with the siege. And in fact, if it wasn't for them arriving, then it probably wouldn't have happened. And that was during the Third Crusade. And due to the infighting within the Christian armies and just general nobles, Saladin decided to attack. Now, this was one of the main features of Saladin that made him so dangerous. It's not because of how powerful his army was, or generally his military ability. It's when he chose to attack. He always chose to attack during times when the kingdoms were in dire need of a new leader, or in the summertime, perhaps when things were a lot hotter and therefore water was more scarce. So Saladin began to march upon Jerusalem on the 18th of November, 1177. Baldwin rode to Ascalon, which was a castle in the way of his march on Jerusalem, and ordered all able-bodied men to fight. Saladin reached Ascalon on the 22nd of November, 1177. Now, initially, Baldwin led his troops to face Saladin outside of the city, which, because he was outnumbered, he immediately retreated back in. Now, of course, riding out of your city is a pretty bad idea when you're under siege, especially if you're outnumbered. And of course, when you're inside your city, you have a much better chance of winning. However, Saladin made one mistake that would cost him this campaign, is that he chose to leave Ascalon alone. This was mainly due to him not wanting to have to wait a while, and also the fact that, of course, with it getting hotter soon, obviously it was November, he didn't want to have to wait, as sieges could take a while, and since, of course, the king was there, it would be a pretty well-stocked city. He wanted to end the campaign quickly. Another reason why Saladin was so successful is he never tended to try and do other tasks. While sieging castles, he always got straight to the point in terms of his military campaigns. So after he left Ascalon, he left no garrisons to stop anyone leaving Ascalon. He just marched straight away. Baldwin then sent out riders to contact the Knights Templar who had been stationed in Gaza, and ordered them to join him. Baldwin then defeated Saladin during the Battle of Monte Gizzard on the 25th of November, 1177. Not only did Baldwin win, while being a leper and also someone who was, of course, quite young at 16, he also won whilst directly charging the enemy and engaging in combat, something that not many kings had done at the time, as, of course, the idea of kings charging directly in combat was phasing out in terms of European monarchs, as, of course, if the king dies, then it plunges the realm into chaos. Now, at this point, Baldwin's luck, however, started to run out slightly. Baldwin didn't have enough men to run down the retreating Muslim forces, which included Saladin, as although he was gravely wounded, he was still able to retreat and survive. And in April 1179, Baldwin nearly died at the hands of Farrukh Shah, the nephew of Saladin, who had been ordered by Saladin to monitor the king's movements. Baldwin then led out more raiding parties into Saladin's territory before Saladin's own raiding parties defeated Baldwin at the same time as they met again. Again, Baldwin nearly died, and then following that, the castle of Le Chastellot then fell in August 1179. Again, another important castle. Now, there was then more problems for Baldwin. See, there were more troubles in his court over successors and marriages, and Baldwin was forced to sign a 2-year truce with Saladin. Now, it can be seen as almost a mistake for signing this truce, as it allowed Saladin to focus on gaining more territory in Syria, which of course would give him access to more resources and more men to fight with. And although the truce was meant to break in 1182, in May, it ended earlier in mid-1181 when Raymond of Chatillon seized a Muslim merchant caravan heading from Egypt. This was something that was a common problem, was that fanatics like Reynald were fresh from Europe essentially with the Knights Templar, and so were constantly raiding. This resulted in Saladin once again marching on Jerusalem, beginning with the siege of Le Forblet on the 15th of July 1182. However, Baldwin, once again outnumbered, proved himself and defeated Saladin, so we can see Baldwin getting his luck back again in that sense, and also proving once again he was a capable military commander. Saladin then retreated but attacked from two fronts, a very smart move. He attacked from the south of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, and he also attacked Beirut. Now, Baldwin knew that this was Saladin's move to try and split Baldwin's army, as if he split the army, which was already quite thin in numbers, it'd be easier to defeat. He chose to sacrifice the southern region of his kingdom in order to liberate the siege on Beirut. Baldwin then marched into Saladin's Damascus territory, and following some victories in the winter of 1182, Baldwin then decided in the winter of 1182 as well to once again attack Damascus. He also was able to scare off Saladin into abandoning the siege at this time as well. Now, he then chose to abandon his attack on Damascus due to the fact that he planned to burn down multiple mosques in the area until a local Christian clergyman convinced him not to, as of course Saladin would then respond in kind, burning down churches. Now, at this point, Baldwin's luck once again had gone up from earlier defeats, but sadly for Baldwin, it was going to plummet once again, and this time for a lot worse. From 1183, Baldwin could not walk unsupported or use both of his hands, as of course leprosy results in the losing of body parts. Not only this, he had gone blind from not being able to blink, resulting in his eyes drying out. And in June 1183, despite all these problems, Baldwin still was forced to summon troops to respond to Saladin's conquest of Aleppo. But following this, the king then developed a life-threatening fever. Now, this, of course, was quite a common problem in the Kingdom of Jerusalem, as in hot desert areas, fevers were quite easy to come by, especially from mosquitoes. Now, due to all of this, Baldwin allowed Guy de Lusignan to rule the Kingdom of Jerusalem. The only part that the king actually retained was Jerusalem and his title. Now, Baldwin did recover completely from this fever after spending time by the coast, but still allowed Guy to rule. But in late 1183, Saladin laid siege to Karak Castle, while Baldwin's half-sister was inside the castle. Baldwin took back control of the kingdom, fearing for the fact that Guy was not trained and experienced in terms of commanding military forces. And due to that, it was seen that the king had no successor, so he made Baldwin V co-king and crowned him on the 20th of November. This was due to, at this point, most people knew that Baldwin was going to die soon, so they forced him to have a successor. Saladin then abandoned the siege on the 4th of December when the king arrived with, of course, his army. Following this, more infighting resulted in a decline of health again for Baldwin, and he died between March and May 1185, aged just 25. It's never been pinpointed. And only 2 years later, the Kingdom of Jerusalem was destroyed by Saladin. Now, overall, Baldwin can be called a great monarch. After all, under his rule, the Kingdom of Jerusalem did lose no territory to Saladin or any other forces. However, it can also be claimed that Baldwin was only a figurehead monarch, as he did appoint most of his duties to other nobles. This will be included, and also clergymen. This can be seen with the fact that he relied heavily upon Renaud of Tripoli and Guy de Lusignan. But in many ways, this can also be disproven with the fact that Baldwin led many battles directly, like Montagizard. So, in conclusion, compared to other leaders and monarchs in the Kingdom of Jerusalem and other surrounding Crusader states, Baldwin is a great noble and a great king. However, compared to European monarchs, he's more of just an average one, as of course people like Richard the Lionheart proved more or less to be better, um, yeah, than Baldwin IV. So I would argue that although Baldwin IV is certainly over-idolized in the West, it's not unjust. Thank you for watching.